Welcome, everybody. Lee Henson Hasty here on Leading Theologically with my friend Jan Edmiston with the Presbytery of Charlotte. Thanks so much for being here, Jan.
I'm really pleased to be here. One of my favorite people, and I get to talk about
Oh, gosh. Okay, I'm going to start blushing. I can already see it. Y'all, we may start going into a little North Carolina accent, so please keep us honest. You know, I have that in me. I think most of y'all know. I'm the Senior Director of Theological Education Funds Development at the Theological Education Fund at the Presbyterian Foundation. It's Committee on Theological Education Work, and it's really an honor, and it's allowed me to meet and get to know Jan in various contexts and leadership roles. And gosh, when she said yes to coming on this, I just did a little dance, because as you will see, many of you probably already know, she is awesome and always has something beautiful to share. She blogs also at A Church for Starving Artists. I encourage you. She's been doing that for over 20 years, like 2005, almost 20 years.
Almost 20,
2005. And she regularly posts, and it's great stuff. I mean, it gets reposted on social media, but you can subscribe and follow Church for Starving Artists. And the most recent blog, by the way, I'll just give a little word because it's really a request for a prayer is, and now I've lost it. It's about, there's already another one. She just
posted. A new
one. But there was one, there still is one about Evan Gershkovich, who's being detained in Russia, and it's sort of prayers for him and his release. So we'll add, that's an Easter prayer we hope for sure. You're in your home with, looks like George Floyd looking over your shoulder.
Oh, I wish George Floyd was looking over my shoulder, but his image is there. This is my favorite cover of the New Yorker, so I just included it. It's got it's a magnificent art that just reminds me of where we are these days.
100%, like the weight of the world on his neck, right? It's scary. It's scary to think. Jan, I think you just speak so honestly and forthrightly and frankly, and yet still with this silver lining of hope. And I loved it. I think in your blog, you talk about yourself as being someone loving the church enough to transform it, realizing we're not done yet. So we're going to be talking about that. I hope others who are here let us know you're here. But as we get started, I'd love to hear, Jan, more than about what you learned at University of North Carolina, more than about what you learned at Andover Newton in theological school, or Columbia Seminary with a doctor of ministry in Christian spirituality, or as co-moderator, what the first in a series of co-moderators. Everybody's followed your way. You know, what is it? We've said making you come alive, but I think Maria Asasi Diaz really helps us think about our context. So she often asks something like this: what are you noticing happening around you right now?
People are really tired. So I live in Charlotte. I'm a mid-council leader. I'm a general presbyter in Charlotte. And that's not just Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, but it's 7 counties, including Lee's hometown in Monroe. And it's so rural, small town, larger town. I learned recently that Charlotte is now bigger than Atlanta. I'm not sure what that means in terms of population. Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of people move to Charlotte every day. But so here I am in the Bible Belt. I live in a place where people, the streets are named after our churches. We have 7 churches that are older than the country, as well as some newer ones. And the people in our churches run banks and hospitals and universities and seminaries. And so I feel really fortunate to be here. And as I wrote recently, one of the things I noticed on Easter is that this felt like the most secular Easter I've ever experienced in my life. And I preached at one of our churches. My husband's also a pastor, Fred Lyon. He preached, I don't know how many times, 3 times maybe on Easter. And we both agreed it just felt very secular. I would not have known I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. And maybe that speaks to my own neighborhood. Fred and I live in a neighborhood that's got every kind of person here. We're not really cool enough to live in this neighborhood. It's Plaza Midwood, but we love it's dynamic. It is very diverse. It's an interesting place to live. We went to brunch for Easter, and we weren't really dressed to the nines ourselves. I'm not wearing an Easter bonnet, etc. He's wearing a bow tie. Actually, I think he took off his bow tie, but we are the best dressed people in there. And by that, I mean, people are wearing cutoff shorts. Nobody says Happy Easter. There's no Easter brunch menu. I mean, it was just like a regular day. And as we're walking around our little neighborhood, there was no sign it was Easter Sunday, as opposed to
no Easter egg hunts or pastel colors.
Not anything I could see in my neighborhood, but and that is not true for some of our places in this country, but it's very true for many of our places in this country. And so what I see in general, what I notice around me is a lot of anxiety, a lot of stuckness and fear, a lot of despair and diseases of despair that our churches are dealing with, or could be dealing with more, but also hope. And that's where I get asked on a regular basis, how can you do this job of mid-council ministry? Because just like being a hospital chaplain, people tend not to call the office unless something is wrong. And so I deal with a lot of things that are going wrong, and you can all imagine what those things are. Some of you do the same, have the same day. And I could not do it if I also didn't see massive displays of hope. So, for example, the church that has crunched their numbers and they are just a great church, but they are not going to be with us for the next 5 years. And they know the reality of that. So they have decided they're going to spend their time creating a legacy. One of our churches is looking at a variety of things, from home affordable housing to some partnerships with other nonprofits or even for-profits, in the knowledge or the expectation that they won't be here in 5 years. Here's the cool thing. I would not be a bit surprised if they are not only here, but thriving in 5 years, and other things have happened beyond their imagination. So I get to see that kind of thing all the time. My most recent blog post is about magical thinking. And it sometimes feels like magic in that, for example, our presbytery was blessed a couple weeks into COVID when we found out we inherited a bunch of money from someone that funded COVID grants for any of our churches who needed it for technology or whatever. And that feels magical, but it wasn't magic. That was the faithful decision of a couple from one of our churches. The husband had passed away many, many years before. The wife had just passed away in December. And I get a out of nowhere call from her son who says, my parents left the presbytery this money to do whatever you want to do with it. I see
they had been loved and formed and shaped in congregations, right?
And nobody had prayed for that money. I mean, sometimes I think we use prayer as magic, expecting something to happen. I do expect things to happen, but not magically. I think God uses people and so forth. But I have a lot of hope for the church. I also feel that heaviness because for our churches to thrive in the future, some huge changes are going to have to happen, and it will not be pretty. And a lot of pastors feel like they didn't sign up for that. And they just don't have the bandwidth. And
right.
Yeah.
Friends, I see Glenn Bell is here. Thanks for being here. Glenn, if there's others you're here, please let us know you're here. We'd like to know where your context is and what you're thinking about. Jan, her context primarily is in the Presbytery of Charlotte, which is more than just Charlotte. It goes to Monroe and Wadesboro and I think all the way to Hamlet.
All the way to Hamlet, and then to the north, Davidson, and then all the way to the South Carolina border. Although we have one church in South Carolina. I'm not sure how that happened. First Pageland in Pageland, South Carolina is on our presbytery. It's a bonus for us.
This is home, territory for me. She shared earlier, and so I know these towns she's talking about. I've driven those roads. I lived in Rockingham actually.
Oh yeah.
So, but she is noticing that even in the midst of this Bible Belt, you wouldn't necessarily know it was Easter. That's an interesting observation, and yet there's some fateful things. This story about the church that's sort of done the calculation and wants to leave a legacy, and you think they may even still be here. That sounds like an Easter story. They're willing to lose their life, and they're not expecting that to be some life for their church, to continue as a congregation, but it might be. But it's that kind of gutsiness, boldness.
That's
I guess.
Right.
Would you call it that?
Absolutely. One of the biggest problems with so many of our churches is the fear. Just so afraid that one false move and we'll close the door. So we call the wrong pastor. We buy the wrong paint color for the front door. We, we send the wrong kids to camp. Just the fear. And, but I see that just in the culture in general. We are a ridiculously fearful world. You see that in the gun violence every day. People are afraid they're shooting a child who, rings your doorbell without even finding out what he's doing there in the middle of the day. We're just afraid. And I think I don't want to just blame the media, but I think the culture makes us afraid. And so we need to ask ourselves, whose power gets maintained if we are afraid? Because the power of God, helps people be fearless, like that church that wants to do something that would create a legacy.
Right. 100%. Well, and I'll say the Presbytery of Charlotte, I've heard a little bit more. You probably should tell, Presbytery of Charlotte, when you receive this unexpected gift, you can use this money for whatever you want. You easily said, let's put that in an endowment.
Oh no!
Fund our operations going forward, but that's not what you did, right?
No, I think we spent all that money, and it wasn't like $1 million or anything, but it was I think it was a couple $100,000.
Right.
But any of our churches that needed, especially during COVID, our role as a presbytery, a mid-council, is to equip and resource our congregation so that they can pivot. And everybody had to pivot during COVID. So people needed new technology. They needed new microphones. And we also had, and this was maybe even better than having that money, we had people that our presbytery paid out of that money to be consultants, because this church might only need new microphones. That church needs a whole system. So you don't walk into Best Buy and spend $10,000 when you really only needed to spend $1,000.
Right.
Yeah. So it was really good.
Well, and I know I read about this, or maybe you share with me too, that I don't know if it was that particular gift or during the last few years, you had some discernment about when you receive money.
Oh yeah.
How that money would be spent and shared. I don't know how that came about.
So, and this is resurrection in that a couple of our churches are closing. And so what we'll do with that money, we are fortunate in that, especially in this area, not just in Mecklenburg County, but all around, our real estate is worth a lot of money. We have no problem selling property if we want to sell property. What a couple churches are doing, especially those that used to be considered outside Charlotte that now are right in Charlotte, we have churches with 20 and 30 acres of property, and they don't need that much property. So some of them sell off property to help fund their budget. I think in the long run, that is not wise. I understand why churches do it, but that would not be my advice.
It's not less transformative, maybe.
But I think we do have conversations about how to use our money in a way, and this is always my line, in a way that addresses what breaks God's heart. So, for example, we have more African-American Presbyterians than any other presbytery in the country because of generational wealth and systemic racism and white supremacy and all those things that we talk about. Our African-American pastors, not completely, but many of them have less in terms of retirement.
Right.
It could be that they were never called and installed, but they served churches as temporary supply pastors, and they weren't even in the board of pensions. So one of
Wow.
the things we decided to do when we got a big chunk of money was every time we get a big chunk of money, whether it's the sale of a property or somebody leaves something in their will, we take 10% of it and put it in a fund for our retired African-American pastors who are members of the
Wow.
presbytery. So
Wow.
every November they get a check, and it's not thousands and thousands of dollars, but it's fairly substantial.
Right.
And so
That's Thanksgiving. That sounds like Thanksgiving money to me. That's a Thanksgiving.
well, Christmas money. Yeah, that's right. But it's not, it's important to point out that this is not because we think Black people are poor, because
Right.
that is not the case. They probably have served churches that could not pay them as well as some white churches. This is about reparations, although people don't like the R word, but it's a tiny, tiny thing to do. We don't congratulate ourselves for coming up with that idea as much as, okay, that's one thing we can do. Let's move on. What are some other things we can do?
Right. Right.
And we are really blessed with the legacy of Catawba Presbytery, which was
Right.
the first African-American presbytery, and it was part of what was formerly the Northern Church, United Presbyterians. So we have that rich heritage, and what are we doing to honor that heritage?
Right. Well, and folks, if you didn't watch or listen to the show with Ed Newberry, who's a retired minister in the Presbytery, we talked a little bit more about Catawba, and there's a beautiful video, and Jan, you're a part of it. And I encourage people to learn more about it. And great stuff with the Historical Society you can access as well. So definitely a true gift there. Friends, I'd love to know if you're here, if there's questions, comments that you have you'd like to bring forward. Jan is a rich resource. I understand you have a sabbatical coming up.
I do.
What are you thinking about doing there?
So I've got June, July, and August off, and I'm a little bit obsessed with secular authors who write about things that are interesting for the church context.
Mm-hmm.
I've written about these in my blog. Brene Brown, everybody knows Brene Brown. Brene Brown has questions to ask any institution about how to change a culture. They come from Daring Greatly. Those are great questions for any church that's trying to figure out what our culture is. If you ask the average church person, what's the culture of your church? They don't even know how to answer that. But it's simple things like, are we allowed to bring a coffee cup into the sanctuary? What's the dress code? What do people frown upon? What will you get a stink eye for doing during worship? And
by the way, I can never see you giving the stink eye.
But I watch people give the stink eye all the time. I love Yancey Strickler's book. I'm going to be talking with him. I like Leidy Klontz, who wrote the book Subtract. He's a professor at UVA. I'm going to talk to him. I get to go with what used to be Macedonia Ministries, quite a few clergy friends, to Israel in July. And then I'm just going to kick back with my husband. We're going from Tel Aviv to Italy for a couple of weeks. And I'm going to be doing some writing. I don't know what form that will be, but I feel like, and I'd love to get feedback from you and anybody else. A lot of our churches know at this point that their culture needs to be shifted. We just need to kind of crack open what we've always done and let the Holy Spirit speak to us and spark some new things. But how do you walk a church through that? I went to a Presbyterian women event maybe 5 years ago, and it killed me because they were talking about, we need new ideas. We need new members. All of our members are north of 50, if not 60. What are some ideas? And the ideas they thought of is we could have a car wash. These are older women. We could have a bake sale. It was just stuff that churches have done for a long time. That
garage sale, yard sale.
Right. All those things that are very labor intensive. Right. And there are other things they could do. I think the future, for example, holds a lot of hope for our congregations and even presbyteries that partner with unlikely partners. Whether it's with our Jewish neighbors, our Lutheran neighbors, our Baha'i neighbors, Bank of America, the YMCA. I mean, whatever it is, I think that partnering for shared goals is really, really important for the future. One of the conversations that I had with our presbytery at a meeting, one of the big mega churches in our area is called Elevation. And I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but let's say Elevation, which has a main campus in Charlotte, and then they've got some satellites, and they have about, again, I'm going to get my numbers wrong, but let's say it's 150,000 members. In the Presbytery of Charlotte, we have more members than that. I think 150,000 is an incorrect number, but we have about 10 or 20,000 more members than Elevation. What if we see ourselves not as 92 different churches, but we're a church with 92 satellites?
Okay.
And so, yeah. And one of the things that was great about COVID and doing so many things online, I would get a call. Our church is not doing a Bible study this fall. Are there other churches doing Zoom Bible studies?
Exactly.
Here, go over here. Don't be afraid that they're going to like that church better than your church. Just go with it.
Trust.
Because increasingly we have people who are parts of multiple congregations and multiple organizations.
Right.
That is really hard to hear. I hear every single day, when are people going to come back to church? Every day. And maybe we're looking at the wrong people.
Right. Maybe it'll be different people. When we were warming up, I was sharing with Jan, my clergy cohort was at Princeton Seminary, and we met with Eric Barretto. It was really awesome. Talked about Luke, but we also went and visited the farming area there, because Eric and Nate Stuckey are doing a course together. And I'm just thinking, like, what if you thought about the presbytery? It's like a farm. I mean, there's different rows.
Yeah.
There's one farm. I mean, we're all, it's body of Christ kind of stuff, like different parts, we're all part of the same body. But, I can't let go of the whole idea of, wheat is, it is like 18% humidity when it's harvested. It's essentially dead, for it to rise to new life. I mean, I think what you're talking about is just doing things differently, not trying to keep that wheat alive in the same way it was, right? Let it live a new life and crack open. I mean, if it doesn't, seeds work the same way. I can't, the whole farm thing is just, I can't let go of it. I mean, I think it's you got to have some new ways of thinking. So where do you see some beautiful things happening? Some things that sort of surprise you, like, yes, or that's beautiful. Maybe you were part of it. I don't know. I mean, the story of how you're paying reparations, at least as a start, is a beautiful one. I'm just wondering if there's other stories. And by the way, John Wall is joining us. He's saying, I'd love to have a list of that reading that you do from sabbatical to share. So I'm sure you'll do that.
I'm sure.
Good at doing that.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. Churches. Okay. So I was thinking about mistakes that we're making right now. Because we're tired, we're going to go the easiest route, even if it's just lazy. But mistakes we're making right now are a lack of imagination, a fear that we're going to lose people, more people will leave. And I wrote a blog post today about magical thinking, because I think the churches that are doing really cool things are doing scary things, really scary things. But they're not scared. They're taking seriously the whole fear not stuff from the angels. When I talk to churches that are really excited about something, they say, even Jan, I'm pitching this to you, but even if you say no, or you don't have any idea where we can get some assistance with this, we're still going to do it. We know we're going to do it. And it could be, we've got quite a few churches looking at affordable housing projects. And we are fortunate to have a nonprofit in Charlotte, headed up by somebody who happens to be Presbyterian, who partners churches with property with nonprofits or other organizations that need property to work together. And she's brilliant. Her name is Liz Ward. Tip of the hat to Liz Ward, who is a member of Covenant Presbyterian Church in Charlotte. We're working with her. We're trying to make it possible for other churches to also work with her, because she doesn't work for free, obviously. But churches that are doing scary things, and the scary things could be everything from, oh my gosh, should we close our preschool? If you've had a preschool for a really long time, and you imagine, maybe it's true, but maybe it's not true, that everybody knows us because of our preschool, but our preschool is losing money, and we don't really need another preschool in this neighborhood anymore. We're having a hard time getting people. I mean, there are just so many things, especially for our oldest churches, and I mean historically oldest.
Mm-hmm. Some older than the country, you said.
Some are older than the country, and when you've got multiple generations in a church, there's a sense of ownership.
Right.
On the one hand, that can be great and beautiful. On the other hand, not so great. If you feel like my great-great-grandparents are in this cemetery, and so if you don't do what I want, I'm going to take my money or I'm not even going to leave, because those families probably don't want to ever leave, because those are their home churches.
Right.
But they're going to make life miserable for anybody who wants to do something new.
Right.
So it's a great question to ask. What scary things are we doing right now? And I don't mean foolish things, but what if we took $100,000 out of our cemetery fund and used it to start a program with the elementary school that's right next to us?
Right. Yes. Yes. A tutoring program or a lunch program. And you're saying, and it sounds like, I mean, housing, I know affordable housing is an issue across the country, but as Charlotte gets larger than Atlanta and more people are moving there every day, I'm sure housing is just skyrocketing.
Right.
That sounds like that pushes, probably, especially, this is a class issue. People on the margins, pushes them away. And so that sounds like ministry. You were telling that, and one of our mutual friends, Mindy Douglas, among others, her church, First Durham, started paying off medical debt, and I think they're doing it 2 or 3 times, things like that, and they don't expect anything back.
Right.
But this is what we do, because you shouldn't be silenced by that. I mean, there's some beautiful things happening around the world. And I know our time is, it's running past. Friends, if there are questions, I know there was a comment. We'd love to hear them. Let me finish that sentence. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. Lisette Gonzalez Sosa. I think she is putting kind of sort of an exclamation point on your comment around the reparations work, and wondering if maybe the Board of Pensions could be get involved in that, or some other way. There's opportunities for our agencies too. I mean, at the foundation with theological schools, there's other institutions that can also accept your invitation to do something scary, something different, and not be scared to do it.
Right.
And appreciate that comment, Lisette. Other questions folks have before we have to go. And I just want to say, I'm glad everybody was here. I'd love for you to subscribe and review to the podcast, Leading Theologically. 70 some shows. It's crazy to say, but some beautiful leaders and people. And love for you to come back 2 weeks from now. We're about every 2 weeks. Jenny Norris Lane, who's out of Texas, but is the executive director of UKirk Collegiate Ministries. That's is there a UKirk in the Charlotte area, or maybe
there is? So it's not well.
Not everybody uses UKirk.
Not everybody uses that, but certainly there are chaplains at Queens, Davidson, Johnson C. Smith, Central Carolina Community College, UNC Charlotte. Yeah. So
we'll be talking with Jenny. It's a variety of things. It's very contextual. I have also Raj Nadella coming up from Columbia about post-colonialism in the Bible, Chris Burton from Union around the Leadership Institute. And this is news flash, and it's a question mark, but I have been encouraged to have someone interview me. So that may be my last show of the 3rd season. Jan will already be on sabbatical at this time.
But y'all should tune into that, because Lee has wisdom that he probably doesn't get to convey, because he's asking the questions.
I talked way too much. But thank you. That's kind. Thanks everybody for being here. There are other things you'd like to say, Jan. I'd love for you to also send and bless us.
I will. Oh goodness. I mean, I'm tired of even hearing myself say this. But we'll say it one more time.
I understand.
If your church is addressing what breaks God's heart in your neighborhood, in the name of Jesus Christ, your church will thrive and grow. That's
Amen.
basically it. So you've got to find out what breaks God's heart. You may think you know, but you can't know unless you know your neighbors and you have relationships with people who don't cross the threshold of your building. And so may God bless you with fearlessness and courage and a delight in knowing and trusting that God is with us. And resurrection is the gift that we get. But don't be afraid.
Do not be afraid. Amen. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jan, and thanks others who are here with us. We're glad you're here. Blessings to you. Hope to see you again soon.
Yeah.
And prayers for your sabbatical that's
Thank
coming
you.
around the corner. And may may you be renewed in your
Yes.
energy and your vision and your writing and all that you do. And I've got to say thank you for the gift you have and continue to be, not only to me and to Charlotte, but to the Presbyterian Church, the church, and more broadly, a true gift and inspiration. And I know you're never looking for it. You're shaking your head like you don't want any of this attention, but I'm just so grateful. Blessings, everyone, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.